Marcus Lamb made a phone call 2 days before he died that nobody at Daystar television network wanted the public to ever hear about. And for almost 2 years, almost nobody did. The network carried on. The broadcast kept airing. Joni Lamb appeared on camera, looking composed and grief-stricken in equal measure. And the person Marcus had specifically named to lead the ministry he spent 30 years building was quietly, methodically removed from every corner of the organization he had been groomed to inherit. This is a story of that phone call, the woman who received it, what she did with it, and why the full weight of what she knew eventually became impossible to keep silent about. My name is not important. What matters is that the story you are about to hear draws from documented reporting by the Roy's Report, public records, verified accounts from former staff, and the direct testimony of individuals who were inside this ministry during the events described. The goal here is not to condemn anyone. It is to give you the full picture of what the evidence actually shows, because the picture is considerably different from what Daystar Television Network has presented publicly. Daystar Television Network was founded in the 1990s by Marcus and Joni Lamb and grew over 3 decades into one of the largest Christian media organizations in the world. At its peak, the network claimed a broadcast reach of more than 65 million households in the United States alone and a global footprint extending into multiple continents. It operated from a campus in Bedford, Texas, where Marcus served as president and CEO. Joni served alongside him as co-host, on-air personality, and the face that millions of viewers associated most immediately with the network's warmth and spiritual accessibility. By all outward appearances, it was a family ministry built on faith, family unity, and a genuine broadcasting mission. Marcus Lamb died on November 30th, 2021. He was 64 years old. The cause were complications from COVID-19. He had been publicly outspoken against COVID vaccines, a position that drew national media attention both during and after his illness. His death was sudden enough, in the trajectory of his sickness, that a question of what happened in his final days became central to everything that followed. Because in those final days, according to the person he called, Marcus was not finished making decisions about Daystar's future. Denise Boggs is not a peripheral figure in this story. She is a co-founder of Living Waters Ministry, a Texas-based Christian counseling and discipleship organization she has led since 1998. She is the author of more than 20 workbooks and small group curricula. She appeared on Daystar's own broadcast platform as a trusted guest, someone the Lamb family invited into their professional and personal world over decades of friendship. She was not a passing acquaintance or a distant observer. She was, by any reasonable description, part of the inner circle, which is precisely why what she eventually disclosed carried the weight it did. According to Boggs, and as reported by the Roy's Report, Marcus Lamb called her approximately 2 days before his death. He was physically weakened but mentally clear. He dictated specific instructions to her about the future leadership of Daystar. Those instructions named his son, Jonathan Lamb, as a person he wanted to lead the ministry after his passing. He outlined specific roles for others in the family. He described a succession blueprint that was detailed, deliberate, and purposeful. And according to Boggs, he made no mention whatsoever of Joni assuming the presidency. Let that land for a moment, because it is a single detail that changes everything else that follows. Marcus Lamb had spent 30 years building Daystar alongside Joni. She was his wife, his co-host, the public face of the network in many viewers' minds. The assumption at the time of his death, widely held by supporters and insiders alike, was that Joni would naturally assume leadership. That assumption was never formally contradicted by anyone in a position to know otherwise, at least not publicly, until Denise Boggs spoke. Boggs did not immediately go to the press. She has stated consistently, in public interviews and accounts reported by journalists Laura-Lynn, Thompson, and others, that she held Marcus's instructions privately, praying and trusting that the family would honor them without external pressure. She watched the memorials. She observed Joni's composed, eloquent public appearances in the weeks and months after Marcus's passing. She gave the benefit of the doubt, as people who love an institution tend to do when something inside it begins to feel wrong. She told herself there were internal complexities she could not fully see, that grief distorts decision-making, that time would realign things. Time did not realign things. What happened instead was a pattern that Boggs and others who were watching from close proximity described as systematic erasure. Jonathan Lamb, the man his father had named the successor, began disappearing from Daystar's visible footprint in ways that were subtle at first and then undeniable. His appearances on the network's flagship program, Ministry Now, became infrequent. His name dropped from project credits and organizational pages. His wife, Susie Lamb, who had built her own presence on the network alongside him, faded from view at the same pace. No public announcement explained their absence. No official statement addressed the change. They were simply, gradually, no longer there. People who had known the ministry for years noticed. Longtime staff members approached Boggs with concerns. They described meetings being held without their knowledge, decisions being made without consultation, roles being restructured without explanation. The open, prayer-centered culture that Marcus had built, one where spontaneous worship in hallways was not unusual and where transparent communication had been a deliberate organizational value, was shifting. The atmosphere was becoming guarded. The smiles were becoming calculated. Fear, described by multiple staff members in accounts relayed through Boggs and later corroborated by the Roy's Report's own journalism, was replacing the kind of faith-first environment that had defined the place under Marcus's leadership. Staff began using a phrase privately that captures this cultural shift more precisely than any policy memo could. They called the new inner circle surrounding Joni the Daystar Mafia. That phrase, sharp and uncomfortable as it is, was not applied by hostile outside critics. It came from people who had invested years of their working lives into the ministry, who had believed in its mission, and who were now describing a workplace where loyalty to a small group of insiders had replaced commitment to the broader organizational vision. Access to leadership became controlled. Decisions became opaque. Asking questions was treated less like accountability and more like disloyalty. Raising concerns risked your position. Staying silent preserved it. That calculation, repeated enough times in enough hallways, is exactly how a culture of fear becomes self-sustaining. Here is where the story accelerates beyond internal workplace dynamics into something more serious, and where Denise Boggs' role becomes more than simply witnessing a difficult leadership transition. In August of 2021, while Marcus was still alive, an incident at a family beach house in Florida raised alarming concerns about the safety of Jonathan and Susie's young daughter, referred to throughout this series as Baby Lamb. Boggs was directly involved in bringing a forensic counselor into that situation to conduct a proper investigation. According to Boggs' account, corroborated by later reporting in the Roy's Report, that investigation was shut down prematurely by Marcus and Joni before it could be completed. The suspected family member was never properly interviewed. Jonathan was told the investigation had cleared the suspect. That was not, according to the forensic counselor and Boggs' own testimony, an accurate representation of what the investigation had actually concluded. Jonathan did not know this was false. Not yet. He had trusted his parents' account. He believed his daughter was safe and the matter had been properly handled. It would be more than 2 years before the truth of what Boggs actually knew about that investigation reached him. On November 18, 2023, just 2 days after a contentious board meeting in which Jonathan was pressured to sign a non-disclosure agreement and threatened with termination, Boggs told Jonathan and Susie directly that the investigation had not cleared the suspected family member. She told them what she had witnessed, what the counselor had concluded, and what had been done to end the process before it reached completion. Jonathan has described that revelation in interviews with the Roy's Report as devastating. He had believed his daughter was safe. He had trusted his parents' word on the most important question a parent can face. The realization that he had been misled changed the entire nature of the conflict with Daystar. What had been a painful family and professional dispute became, in Jonathan's own framing, primarily about justice for his daughter. That context is essential for understanding why Jonathan refused to sign the NDA. The board meeting on November 16, 2023 is one of the most thoroughly documented moments in this entire story because Jonathan recorded it and subsequently provided a recording to the Roy's Report, which published it in full. On that recording, Daystar board member Tom Callender, CFO Arnold Torres, and Daystar Tony John Lynch spent nearly 2 hours trying to compel Jonathan's signature. Lynch told Jonathan explicitly that refusing to sign was insubordination and independent grounds for termination. Callender gave him a 24-hour deadline. Jonathan refused. He walked out of that meeting without signing anything and did not change his position in the days that followed. Callender also stated in that meeting that a succession plan previously drafted naming Jonathan as Joni's successor as president of Daystar was not in effect because Callender had not signed it. That admission is significant. It means there was a documented succession plan. It means its operative status was in dispute specifically because of a board member's decision not to execute it. And it means a question of what Marcus intended and what the organization actually implemented were not the same question. After Jonathan refused the NDA, the retaliation escalated at a pace documented in extraordinary detail by the Roy's report. His salary was cut 40%, from $250,000 to $150,000. He was demoted from vice president to a management-level role. He was placed on a performance improvement plan. His company car was removed. Both of his in-laws, Susie's parents, who were also Daystar employees, had their positions eliminated or restructured. In early November 2024, at 5:38 in the afternoon, Jonathan and Susie noticed a purple car following them as they drove with their children through local streets. They pulled video of the car. The license plate was registered to a private investigator named Jameson Bradley Parker. Daystar did not respond to the Roy's report's request for comment about whether the ministry had hired him. And then, on November 16, 2024, exactly 1 year to the day after the NDA board meeting, Daystar's head of security, Shannon Kelly, arrived at Jonathan and Susie's home carrying a firearm and wearing a bulletproof vest. He was there to deliver a termination letter. This was the same person Jonathan had earlier watched on the ministry's own security camera footage, placing a tracking device in the trunk of his company car. Jonathan had caught that on camera in early November 2023 and confronted Kelly directly. Kelly denied it. The next day, a mechanic found the tracker. Jonathan and Susie said that throughout this period they did not feel safe in their own home. They left Texas with their children for much of the summer of 2024 before returning and deciding to speak publicly to the Roy's report, providing hours of recorded audio and extensive documentation. The reporting that followed their cooperation with TRR triggered a wave of departures from the Daystar platform. According to Roy's report coverage, Ray Comfort became the 18th programmer to remove his programming from Daystar, citing concerns about the network's leadership and handling of the abuse allegations. Subsequent reporting tracked the number climbing well beyond that, with one social media account documenting 25 total departures by a later date. Daystar's response throughout all of this was consistent in its structure if not its substance. The organization publicly labeled Jonathan's allegations a smear campaign. Joni Lamb appeared on the network to deny the claims directly and to characterize her son's conduct as motivated by what the organization elsewhere described as a corrupt spirit of greed and power. Her allies, including Pastor Jimmy Evans, appeared alongside her in a public meeting intended to reassure ministry partners. Jimmy Evans had been present at the July 2023 meeting in which Jonathan said he and Joni had been told repeatedly across more than 100 iterations of the same instruction to submit to Joni's authority. The recording Jonathan provided of that meeting includes Evans telling Jonathan and Susie that Joni's voice is God's voice to them. Evans denies that characterization of what was said. Now return to Denise Boggs and the broader question her account raises, because this is where everything converges. Boggs eventually shared what she described as Marcus's final succession instructions with a small group of trusted pastors, longtime staff members, and close family friends. She said Marcus named Jonathan specifically, that the instructions were detailed and deliberate, and that they did not include Joni in the presidential succession. Once those accounts began circulating beyond that initial group, the questions that had been building for years inside the ministry began moving into the broader public. Why was Jonathan gone? Why had the succession plan been set aside? What exactly had Marcus intended? In a development that seemed almost impossible given the trajectory of the entire conflict, reporting from the Roy's report in 2025 surfaced a remarkable additional detail. According to a family friend, Joni Lamb, in the weeks before her own death in May 2026, reportedly told a Daystar board member to give Jonathan back Daystar if he reached out and reconciled. The Roy's Report podcast headline for this account read, Joni's stunning request, give Daystar to Jonathan if he reconciles. Whether that represented a deathbed change of heart, a recognition that Marcus's original intentions had been correct, or something more complicated remains genuinely unclear. What it does suggest is that the succession question was not, even in Joni's own mind, fully resolved in the way the network's public posture had always implied. What does any of this mean for the tens of millions of viewers who have watched Daystar over the years, the donors who have supported it, the staff who built careers inside it? At the most concrete level, it means that the official story of Daystar's post-Marcus era, the story of a natural, faithful, family-honoring transition, is a story that the available evidence consistently complicates. There's a documented succession plan naming Jonathan as president. There's a board member who says he declined to execute it. There's a recorded deathbed account relayed by a trusted insider who was in that phone call. There's a recorded board meeting in which Jonathan was threatened with termination for refusing to stay silent. There's a GPS tracker, a private investigator, a firing delivered to the door by an armed security officer on a Saturday. These are not characterizations. They are documented events, recorded in audio, captured on video, confirmed in public records, and reported through one of Christian media journalism's most credible investigative outlets. The people inside a ministry like this, the ones who gave decades of their professional and personal lives to its mission, deserve to have that evidence treated with the seriousness it actually warrants. Denise Boggs waited. She prayed. She gave the institution the benefit of the doubt far longer than the evidence arguably justified. When she finally spoke, she did so not, by her own account, out of a desire to destroy anything, but out of conviction that honoring Marcus Lamb's legacy meant telling the truth about what he actually asked for rather than allowing a revised version of events to stand unopposed.